welcome to the NBA podcast. My name's Sean, and joining me, Max and Drew from the Boris. You guys are going to have to introduce yourself because it is a bit of a tongue twister, but from another podcast. Welcome on, guys.
Thanks for having us. Yeah, the Boris Dirk Podcast, a little pun, which I'll let Drew explain for those that's not immediately obvious. But yeah, thanks for having us on.
No worries.
Yeah, I owe it all to my dad, who was kind of an early fantasy basketball guy. And I remember having conversations with him in the early 2000s, just about Reggie Miller and Stackhouse and the guys he had on his roster. And it was one of my first fantasy basketball team names because I just grew up loving the style of Boris Diaw. And Dirk obviously goes without saying. And obviously Doris Burke as well, who's been a pillar of our NBA upbringings. But yeah, that's the name. It's not any deeper than that, but I like the way it sounds.
Oh, it's definitely it's definitely a good name. As soon as I was telling a few of my mates, and I'm like, I'm having a chat with these guys next week, the Boris Dirk Podcast, and he's like, I think you've said that wrong, but no, it's nice. But yeah, do you guys mind just sort of introducing what you do, how long you've been podcasting, what sort of stuff you talk about, and so on?
For sure, yeah. So we know each other from going to college together. So we met each other about 7 years now at this point, and we've just been having basketball talks basically since we met. Drew's a diehard Blazers fan. I'm a diehard Knicks fan, but we just follow the NBA overall in depth. So for years, we've just been having kind of basketball talks and following the league, and Drew was very into the draft. I've gotten into draft process as well. And eventually over COVID, we were kind of just, sitting around the house looking for something to do. And we decided to just start recording our basketball talks and sent them out to our friends. And, the friends who were really into basketball really liked it and said we should keep doing it. So yeah, at this point, we've been recording and putting out episodes for probably coming up on 2 years now at this point. We started out actually with a different name, which was Pod Sham Pod. And then then we decided to change to Boris Dirk. But yeah, we've been going strong since kind of that Warriors run to the title in 2022, I feel like is when we really kind of got going with recording pods very frequently and just trying to stay on top of everything as much as we could. And yeah, it's at the very least a great way for us to stay in touch and a great passion project for both of us.
Yeah, I think we were just geeking out on the league so many hours a week that at a certain point you were like, all right, let's be honest. I know we have some performance anxiety, but if we could turn this into a life or just make it a cool resume thing, applying to podcast production jobs and stuff like that. I'm in film school right now, but would happily take a cool sports media job after that. And yeah, like Max said, the original name was Pod Sham Pod because my dad's fantasy basketball league was the God Sham God League. Maybe the best name in the history of the league. Appreciate Max giving you that. And also, I'm a guy who, my dad's from Portland. So my early memories of the league are pretty dark. I was raised in a very turbulent household. I think people forget that a young Rasheed Wallace, an old Scottie Pippen, and soon-to-be washed Steve Smith took the Shaq and Kobe Lakers to Game 7 of the 2000 Conference Finals. That was the first of 3 years in a row that Shaq and Kobe ended the Blazers season. They swept us in round 1 in 2001. They swept us in round 1 of 2002. And then in 2003, my first real NBA memory, I remember watching this in the living room. First round against the Mavs. This is the first year that they change all of the series in the playoffs to 7 games. So the Lakers have been beating us 3-0. In 2003, we play the Mavs in round 1, and they win the first 3 games of the series. Season's over, whatever. We're still going to watch Game 4 because we're addicts. The Blazers rattle off 3 straight wins, take it up to Game 7, and just completely botch the final minutes of Game 7 against a young Dallas team. And since then, I've been in a group chat with my dad and his cousins called BARC, Blazers Addicts Relief Center. And Boris Dirk is also a source of therapy.
Yeah, it's good to have. And yeah, Portland fans, man, like you guys have really been through the ringer. And like, obviously, you just took off a jersey before we started recording, but like the whole Damian Lillard stuff, like let's just get into that. What were both of your thoughts just going through that whole process.
I'll let Drew go first as the diehard Dame guy.
You know, on paper, when Dame and Nurk together turned into Drew Holiday and DeAndre Ayton initially, wasn't too upset about it. Probably wasn't upset enough. I was feeling so sad for what we'd done to Dame's prime. I think fundamentally the biggest mistake was not making a decision on CJ McCollum early after he broke out, because it was just so obvious that he and Dame could only go so far as a backcourt pairing. We ended up in purgatory as Dame got older and better, to the point that it didn't seem so ridiculous to me when we traded him. It seems ridiculous now, given some of DeAndre Ayton's interviews, the fact that we offloaded Drew Holiday for what feels like nothing at this juncture. But yeah, the asset flipping did not go well. That's for sure. And I generally feel ashamed that I was okay with the trade at the time, because I'm now at a point watching Dame every day in Milwaukee feeling like he just needed to be in Portland. It's just something's off.
But like, you did get a lot. Like, you've started the rebuild quite well. Like, in fact, you started it 2 years while Dame was there. That must feel all right.
Yeah. But maybe that's what upsets me most, is that we didn't just make a hard and fast decision one day that we were going to trade Dame and start from ground zero. We made him sit through a couple of years of turmoil and confusion and front office misdirection. And that's what didn't sit right with me.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I think, not having as much of the emotional attachment to it as Drew did. In the initial return of Drew Holiday and DeAndre Ayton, who I've never been a huge DeAndre Ayton fan, but I felt at the time he was a pretty clear upgrade on Nurkic. That hasn't exactly proven to be the case this season. But I think the return for Drew Holiday, I expected to be a little bit bigger than it ended up being. And then also, I think the Blazers kind of botched not immediately trading Rob Williams and Malcolm Brogdon for what they could get, because I think over the summer, you probably could have gotten at least a first-round pick, maybe multiple for Brogdon and Rob Williams, but both of them have the injury bug constantly hanging over them. And sure enough, it seemed like by about 2 weeks into the season, Rob Williams was out with a season-ending injury, and that asset just kind of went up in smoke. So I think not immediately pivoting from that Drew package into a full rebuild, and instead trying to do this little thread the needle with staying competitive with Malcolm Brogdon and Rob Williams. It wasn't exactly clear how Rob Williams and DeAndre Ayton would play together also. So I just felt like as soon as they did that trade, when they knew they had as healthy as Robert Williams could be and as healthy as Malcolm Brogdon could be, they should have just gotten off of both of them right then. And instead, now they're kind of in this position where the return for Drew, who was the main asset in that Dame trade, just hasn't really borne out yet. And maybe it will down the line, but still, as it is, Drew and I were both really high on Scoot Henderson before the draft. I think we both still have hope for him, even though it got off to a pretty rough start over the first couple months. But both of us, Drew, I think actually may have even had him number one in the draft. I had him number two. Throwing you under the bus there, Drew.
French dude who can shoot.
Oh, it's fine. I'll stand on it.
Yeah. But I think we both saw Scoot as a guy with, legit all-star upside, all-NBA upside. And point guards do tend to struggle in their first seasons, Russell Westbrook, De'Aaron Fox, Darius Garland. All these guys were among the least efficient players in the NBA in their first season. So it's by no means a disaster that Scoot is very inefficient to start his career, and he definitely shows flashes. But certainly you would have hoped in the first post-Dame season to have that clear cornerstone going forward in Scoot, which isn't the case yet, but I think both of us still have hope that he will be that guy.
And the idea of trying to maybe make a push for the playoffs with Rob Williams and Malcolm Brogdon and stuff, it's okay, maybe Shaedon Sharp's going to take a leap, but it's hard to make the playoffs. It's hard to make the play in, and the West and the whole entire league's just deeper now that you've got teams that are we can make the 10th seed and actually get some extra eyeballs on us. So it's really hard to do it. And then to have, to hope for a perfect health season, which just hasn't happened. It's just, yeah, maybe the wrong direction to go, but it's luckily broken for them that they're going to get another higher draft pick, and yeah, you're part of a long, slow rebuild, and you can still trade these guys in the off season.
Yeah, I just think it was a real basketball crime looking Dame in the eye and saying we were trying to win now, when you're not willing to trade, let's say, the third pick that ended up being Scoot or Shaden, even after Shaden showed insane flashes. You trade one of those assets for like a McCall Bridges type. The Nets aren't trying to win now. And there was certainly a time the Nets would have been open to that sort of deal. And, we shouldn't have made Dame wait around. We should have made that deal or gotten off earlier. And yeah, Max, good point on Rob Williams. Like, we've seen Rob Williams be a real playoff asset. And that was a part of the haul that made it seem a little bit more okay. And here we are. I'm not sure. Rob Williams is in Portland now. And so when you're big and in Portland, you tend to have career-threatening injuries.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, we alluded to it before, but career-threatening comments from DeAndre Ayton. Like, what did he say the other day where he's like, I'm already a max player. Like, I don't have anything to prove. And it's like, hold on a minute. You got a lot to prove. Secondly, like, you didn't actually get a max. You had to go and get a max somewhere else, and then your team matched it. It was very strange things to say from a dude who brought like a PS5 to the bubble just because he just like really wanted to keep streaming Fortnite or whatever it was. Like,
and like, yeah, that's why I'm not in the league. I would do that.
It's a pretty stunning, honestly, like fall from grace for Ayton. I feel like from that 2021 finals against Milwaukee, where I mean, even in the conference finals against the Clippers, he looked really good. People were talking about him as maybe a Jokic, if not stopper, a Jokic slower downer in that playoffs. And then, he had a great game one against Milwaukee. And it feels like ever since then, it's just been like, more and more whispers coming out of like, how much does he really love basketball, or how dedicated is he? And the production has just kind of dipped. And yeah, I mean, Drew watches way more Blazers than I do, but whenever I do tune in and see DeAndre Ayton, fade away for an 8-footer over a guy 6 inches shorter than him, I do send Drew just a little facepalm text, and he knows what I'm talking about.
I've never seen a player who has more of a penchant for in the key jump shots, like the NBA 2K animation. He'll shoot a jump shot from 4 feet away. We got to move on. I'll ruin your show.
Yeah, I mean, you've pressed square. The player, their momentum's going towards the rim, but all of a sudden, just right up. Yeah, and it's like the Phoenix traded away a guy who loves just like catching a lob, bringing it down, nice little layup into the basket for a dude in Nurkic who's like, I guess he's a better finisher, but he's not that great a finisher. Phoenix just, poor Phoenix. My friend's a Phoenix fan. It's unfortunate where it's like, oh, maybe let's just like have a look at Udoka Azubuike or whoever their third string center is.
There was obviously a lot more going on in that deal, but I feel like both teams lost in Ayton for Nurk as a straight up swap. I totally agree with you, Max. Like, that's a talent downgrade for Phoenix and a morale downgrade for Portland.
This episode of The Deep 2 is presented by Gelateria Bico, the official gelato of The Deep 2. Gelateria Bico, handmade gelato in the heart of Brunswick.
You want to talk WNBA? Maybe some WNBL? Australian Opals chat? Heck, even dabble in some EuroLeague? Find the W Basketball Show on the Deep 2 Podcast Network.
Yeah. Well, should we move on to your team, Max? May as well.
Sure.
How do you feel? We're mere hours away from Jalen Brunson saying, "Man, like I went to Dallas twice and said I'll sign a 4 for 55 contract," but you must be feeling pretty good at the moment.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much I fully believe that, because he says like his agent. He always says like, my agent was saying, maybe I should test the market. And it's like, okay, worth noting that your agent is the son of the Knicks general manager. But yeah, I mean, if you talked to me a month ago, I was on cloud 9 in January. Knicks traded for OG right before New Year's Eve and ripped off just an absolutely dominant month, which I've seen some people downplay the schedule, which I kind of get, but they also did have really good wins over Philly, over Denver, over Minnesota in that stretch. I think New Orleans as well. So yeah, I mean, Knicks fans are kind of just in a period of waiting for the team to come back, because going into All-Star break, half the rotation was out basically. I mean, Mitchell Robinson's been out since early in the season. He was having a breakout year. Isaiah Hartenstein stepped in to fill in for him and was having a breakout year himself, and then also went out with an injury but should be back. DiVincenzo was like nursing a hamstring by the time All-Star rolled around. OG had what they call a minor elbow surgery, which hopefully he'll be back from soon. Julius Randle dislocated. Yeah, Julius Randle dislocated his shoulder, and they're hoping he doesn't need surgery, but it's not clear. And before they traded for Bogdanovich and Burks, Grimes was in and out with a knee injury too. So the team's just been absolutely decimated since the start of February, basically. But I mean, when I saw this team whole before they traded for Bogdanovich and Burks, which bolsters kind of the one weakness they had of bench scoring. I mean, I thought I've been really avidly following the Knicks since about 2005. And I think it's not a high bar to clear, but I think it's the best Knicks team I've rooted for in my lifetime. The only other real competition would be that 54-win team with Melo and J.R. Smith and old Jason Kidd and Pablo Prigioni back in 2013. But I think that the league was weaker then. I think this team, like Brunson, is pushing towards the top 10 to 15 of the league. We saw in the playoffs last year, he went toe-to-toe with Jimmy Butler. He went toe-to-toe with Donovan Mitchell. The year before, he was going toe-to-toe with Donovan Mitchell on the Mavs when Luka was out. And yeah, if this team can get healthy, which at this point is an if, I trust them to have an elite defense. I trust them to be able to like physically bully pretty much anyone they go up against in the East, with the exception of Miami because they're impossible to bully, and maybe Milwaukee because Giannis and Brook Lopez are just so big, but the rest of their guys can definitely be pushed around. So yeah, I definitely think if they can get healthy and return to the level they were playing at in January, it's a team with a conference finals ceiling. But at the same time, when half your rotation's out at the moment, there are a lot of question marks, and they could lose ground. And if things go poorly, they could end up in like the 5 or 6 range and have a really tough path, even just getting out of the first round.
Yeah, I think I'm actually a little bit higher on the Knicks than you, because it's like you're being very tempered by saying conference final ceiling, but like once you get there, you just need to win 4 games. And
True.
You're as deep as you are, someone gets injured, but even someone on your team gets injured, it's like, oh, Randall's out. Bogdanovich just slides right into the 4. He can shoot. But you know, the old thing is like you need a top 10 player, a top 5 player to like truly win a title. And it's like Brunson, yeah, maybe he's top 15. What's the ceiling on a small point guard? But like you're gonna have a top 5 to 10 defense, right? Like you're gonna have one of the best defenses in the league. It's right there for Brunson to take it. Like if Brunson has all the opportunity in the world these next 2 years just to prove that he can do it. And he hasn't really faltered yet. It's not bad.
Absolutely. And he's the most beloved Knick of probably the 21st century at this point. Also, like he's only been here a year and a half, or I say here, I'm in California, but I still follow the Knicks. He's been in New York a year and a half, and already I think getting that team to the second round last year when Cleveland was really the consensus pick over them in the first round, and the way that they just kind of manhandled that team, and how he just sort of, tried to gut it out against Miami as best he could. And I mean, this year, like it was really kind of a sort of signature moment the night he was named to the All-Star game, and they were playing against the Pacers, and this was at the start of their injury bug where they were missing, 3 of their starters, and Brunson went out, dropped 40, and came back from a double-digit deficit in the second half against the Pacers, and the crowd was like serenading him with MVP chants during his All-Star interview, and that clip went viral of him sort of, showing emotion, which is pretty rare for him. So yeah, I mean, it's certainly a team that I think no one would want to see. They're very just difficult and unpleasant to play against, and they're, for that reason, I think very fun to watch because they play a style that a lot of teams in the NBA don't really play anymore. So yeah, I do have a lot of debates with my brother and our other Knicks fan friend about whether Boston or Milwaukee would be a nicer path in the second round. And I think they could kind of go either way, but no, you're right. You get to the conference finals and who knows?
Just win them. Yeah. And based in California, I have to ask, do you ever get to Knicks games? Or I'm sure you've probably been in the past, yeah?
Yeah. My brother lives out in New York, so I go and visit a decent amount. I mean, when I'm in the Bay Area, so whenever they come to San Francisco to play the Warriors, I go to that game.
Hmm.
And I try to go to one game at MSG every year if I can when I'm visiting, but I haven't gone yet this year.
Yeah. I'm based in Australia. I haven't been to an NBA game. The one time I did go to America, it was during the draft. I was in Memphis and I went to the stadium to watch the draft. That's the closest I've been to watching. I think Marshawn Brooks was in the corner talking to someone. That's the closest I've come to like watching an NBA game. But I do watch YouTube. You know, I'm a person. Side Talk NYC. Are Knicks games at the MSG? At MSG like that? Do you get crazy people like that?
Um, I will say the craziest sports environment I've ever been in was in the 2021 playoffs, game 2, Knicks Hawks. It was the one game in the series that the Knicks won in that 5-game loss to Trae Young and the Hawks. And it was also the first game after like the COVID restrictions had been lifted, so the stadium was full for the first time all year, and it was an absolutely like rabid, raucous crowd. So it definitely does.
Don't lie. They had a really good story about that specific game.
Oh yeah, no, I haven't. I should though.
It's worth going.
I gotta jump on that there too, because I think I was a bit of an MSG hater for a while because it became so it became so common to say like it's the best basketball venue in the league, even in the past few years when the Knicks were largely irrelevant. And I'd been going to mostly Barclays games because I'm based here in New York City. And to save a little bit of cash, I would see the Blazers play the Nets instead of the Knicks. And a few weeks ago, my friend gave me his 6 season tickets for the visiting Blazers at MSG. I was in like the 4th row. Just an insane experience. And I got to see the new look OG Anunoby Knicks. I couldn't believe the environment in like a 40-point blowout that wasn't close at any point in the game. Celebrities off the chain. BJ Novak was next to me. I couldn't believe it. Long live the office. But the buzz in MSG is as advertised. I gotta say, it pains me to admit
it. Damn, that's crazy. And yeah, so after the game, people dressed up as Spider-Man or whatever it is. Are you seeing that or?
I haven't seen that, but I wasn't at either of the games that were like really went viral for Side Talk, like that one against the Celtics a few years ago. But I wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. Okay. Sick. And Bay Area Warriors.
Yep.
God, beautiful segue into my team. I've talked about the Warriors a lot. What do you guys think about this current Golden State Warriors season?
Yeah, I was coming into the season, I was pretty high on the Warriors as a regular season team and low on them as a playoff team. I thought they'd be like a top 4 seed, but thought that their kind of size issues would prove too problematic in the playoffs like they did against the Lakers last year. I still believe the second part. The first part obviously hasn't borne out with them being at the bottom of the play-in, but I think have some hope for them down the stretch of this season. I think they can rack up a lot of wins with this sort of Draymond, Wiggins, Kuminga, Steph, and Podziemski lineup that they've stumbled upon, which has been outscoring opponents by like, I think over 15 points, maybe over 20 points per 100 possessions when it's been playing. And, you know, they're getting Chris Paul back, who I think is going to balance their bench unit at this point. You know, early in the season, their issue was their starters were terrible, but their bench was like usually their best unit. So maybe if you get Chris Paul in there with the bench combined with this starting lineup that's playing pretty well, they can hit their stride a little bit going towards the end of the season. I don't really trust them to do anything much in the playoffs, and I'm very curious to see how they approach whatever happens with Klay Thompson this offseason. But at the very least, you know, if you get into a playoff series, you have Steph, who I still think is a top 5 player. You have Draymond, who, you know, for all of his, you know, faults, is still, I think, a very capable second star next to Steph. And then, you know, got to see what Kuminga's like in the playoffs. I'm probably a little bit lower than consensus on him. But
he led the league in preseason points per game. What are you talking about?
But I do think, I mean, his upside is obviously ridiculous with his athleticism. I have some questions about like his feel for the game and how much he can. He's a good on-ball defender when he's locked in, but can he be a good off-ball defender? How's his passing? I don't really trust his shot, but obviously he's been even just exploding on the scene the last couple months. So I think, I trust him to have a big run or a big-ish run down the stretch of this season, but not sure beyond that.
Yeah. So the good news, Kuminga is who you hoped he was, at least close to it.
Yeah.
And I think
what Max hoped he was. A lot of question marks.
Max is team Jalen Johnson. Don't look at our Twitter. But Podziemski is an offensive savant, like straight up. And I knew that watching his Santa Clara tape. I didn't think that he would hold up defensively, and at least for a little while. And so that's why I didn't have him in my lottery. He's held up defensively better than I would have expected in the games I've watched. And he's also just figuring out how to play within this role because he was the engine of his college offense. Like I think he was the player of the year in his conference. He was an absolute machine. He was the James Harden of the Santa Clara Broncos, I want to say. And now he's figuring out how to subsist on a heavy catch and shoot diet, picking your spots. But I agree with Max as far as the overall ceiling. I love Draymond. I don't hold anything against him. I'll ride with that guy till the end. I just don't. I think that there are too many heavy hitters in the West. It's really hard for me to see the Lakers or the Warriors, this Hall of Fame play-in game we've got cooking. It's hard for me to see either of those teams making a deep run. Yeah. And to Max's point about the starters versus the bench for at least the early chunk of this season, Steph is 38th in on-off differential, which is a shocking thing because the eye test is like they can't win without Steph. And that's mostly true. But the early season Warriors with Chris Paul doing so much damage and orchestrating the second unit, that was a big part of what kept them afloat. And I just think like the closing five isn't good enough to win multiple rounds, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right. It's going to be interesting to see if Klay is going to stay on the bench, which I really didn't know what to think about that Utah game because we won. We almost gave it away, but we won. Klay came off the bench. Klay was just lightning off the bench. So that either means, look, he's too good, put him back into the starting lineup, or has he found a new home? And it's like Steve Kerr has obviously gone in and told plenty of guys to come off the bench, like David Lee and Andre Iguodala, and he's got buy-in from Sean Livingston and David West. And it just seems like why isn't Klay being that guy? Why isn't Klay being the one to do that? And now it looks like we're right there, but maybe he's going to get inserted back into the starting lineup. For some reason, Klay's just a golden goose in the franchise and just has to always start. Maybe I don't know. I don't know what it is, but I hope I can imagine him coming off the bench with Chris Paul getting his classic Golden State 2 points, 1 rebound, 10 assist games. There could be something there, and yeah, you're right. We might not win the fourth quarter, but we might win at least the start of the second, which is something to say. Maybe the end of the third, and maybe that's enough to vault us. But we've just dug ourselves such a big hole. I don't think we can't get out of the play-in race. It's just it's too far down, and the only teams in our area that are getting worse are the Utah Jazz, and it's
and in the West, I mean, so many teams, the teams in the top 4 are just really hard to beat in the first round. Like this is as healthy as the West has been in a really long time. Like we had a few kind of gap years for different teams between the Lakers getting injured and then trading for Russell Westbrook, and then whatever was going on with the Suns last year, and the Clippers have been away for seems like 3 or 4 years. So now that really, knock on wood, everyone's healthy and all these really heavy hitters up and down the standings are there. Just to make a run to the second round from the play-in, you would have to beat 2 really quality teams or 3 really quality teams if you're coming from the 9-10 seed, where just seems like it's too big of a hill to climb even for LeBron and Steph. And LeBron, who I still think in a series can be in any series can be the best player in the series, but it's just at this point too much to ask, I think, with the rest of that roster.
Yeah, one of the weirdest things with the Warriors right now is the Andrew Wiggins story.
Yeah.
And I still have no idea what happened to him in his life. Obviously, I don't want to speculate. There were some crazy rumors. He was the second best player on your title team.
Yeah.
And that's not an indictment on Draymond. Draymond was really good. Like Wiggins, I thought he changed levels. I was ready to say like, oh, wait, insane trade that you get him for D'Lo. Whatever happens, you got the ring. But I don't know what's going on with Andrew Wiggins. I will say the last few weeks have been encouraging. Like he's been really active. He's affecting the passing lanes. He's playing better defense. I think just because his cardio he's had to play himself into shape. The shooting is coming around. He's not a good free throw shooter, but he usually gets to the line at a pretty good clip. That's if I were a Warriors optimist, that would be the hope for me, that you can get something resembling that 2022 playoff Wiggins, because that was a special two-way wing. I think he outplayed Jason Tatum in the biggest games of the year.
I mean, he was an all-star starter, so like I don't know why you didn't expect it. No, but
unimpeachable all-star.
You're completely right. Yeah. He's like, we can't win if he's not even at his 2022 level. Like we can't win if he's just not a good starter. Like if he's just not going to hit his shots, if he's just going to be an average, like, early career Minnesota Andrew Wiggins, where it's like, oh, that's pretty cool. We did like a nice spin move and got to the mid range, and you made a shot. Not really repeatable. We need you to take a couple of steps back and maybe catch and shoot, less dribbling. But in that playoff run, like he would get a switch, and it's like obviously teams are just selling out on Steph and like Draymond once he gets those 4-on-3s, it's just scramble mode, and he would get a switch and he would fully post them up, and it's like this is awesome because it's like you've taken a lot of bad shots in Minnesota, but now you're sort of translating that to only taking the bad shots, which happen to be good shots, against smaller players in the playoffs. And he's guarding Luka Doncic, he's guarding Jason Tatum, and he's doing everything. And at the trade deadline, I really wanted the Warriors just to do something just for. And I didn't have on my bingo card Corey Joseph for cash, but I just wanted him to do something. But every single time I looked at it, like a realistic trade for Andrew Wiggins, like we were selling him at a negative value, and no matter what we did, we weren't going to be able to get like an all-star 3-and-D wing who's hitting like 40% of their threes. The only thing we can do, like you say, Drew, is just hope that he can be better and hope that he can just turn it around. But to pivot a little bit, you mentioned Klay Thompson, Max, and I don't know if you saw the report this morning coming from Mark Stein that this is the first thing I've seen that's like tangible stuff about Klay Thompson's free agency. But the Orlando Magic were, I'll get the wording up. The Orlando Magic are, quote, increasingly mentioned, unquote, as a potential destination for Klay Thompson, and they can open up as much as $45 million in cap space. But what do you think about the first pairing for Klay Thompson?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly wouldn't pay him $45 million, but and Klay's story over the last few years, just being around Warriors fans a lot as I am, has just been so kind of strange because, I mean, he was all the way to 2019. I mean, Steph is like a god in the Bay Area, but Klay was right there as just absolutely beloved, like, legendary playoff performances against the Thunder, even against the Raptors before he got hurt. And then like the injury happened, both injuries happened. Everyone feels really bad for him. The year he comes back, everyone's just sort of like glad he's back, and no one's really putting too much of a microscope on how he's playing. And honestly, I mean, he was not terrible in that first year he came back in that title run. His playoff numbers were like not that far off from his career playoff numbers, even if it didn't feel quite the same. But yeah, there's been a ton of frustration from Warriors fans with Klay, especially this year, some last year as well, and just how it feels like he's really pressing all the time and trying to shoot his way into rhythm. I don't know if he's, unable to get himself as open as he was before because of his injuries in terms of running off screens and things like that. So instead, he's replacing those open jumpers with off the dribble, more contested ones, which were never that great of an option when he had all of his lift, and now he doesn't. But I mean, if he does leave Golden State, which I still think would be a surprise, given that he's going to have his number retired there, he very well might have a statue there. He probably will. And it seems like unless Steph is really, kind of feels like it's time for a change. Yeah, I would be surprised by that. But Orlando does really need a volume 3-point shooter. We are both big fans of Orlando's future. We both love Paolo. I've been super high on Paolo since he was at Duke, and just see him as like his ability to handle the ball and pass at his size is really kind of exceptional, and his ability to just bully most players in the NBA who can't match up with his combination of size, power, speed, ability to handle. So when you combine that, and we both love Franz Wagner as well. Drew's a big Anthony Black guy. So the one thing they're missing is just having that high level shooter in their lineup, which they tried to address with drafting Jett Howard. We'll see how that turns out. They've been sort of cycling through guys between Gary Harris. I shouldn't forget to mention Jalen Suggs, who we both also love. But being able to throw, for whatever he is right now, he's still one of the best shooters of all time, Klay Thompson. So being able to throw him into that lineup, I think makes a lot of sense why they would be targeting that type of player. But it would still surprise me, I think, if Klay left the Warriors. I think he'll end up probably taking a discount if I had to guess, but maybe he wants one more big payday.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. If you're the Magic, I agree with you. They need a volume 3-point shooter. It's like, well, why don't you just like Buddy Hield's a free agent? Just maybe throw a bit more at Buddy Hield. He's 5 years younger. Luke Kennard might get his team option picked up, and you can trade a 2nd-round pick for Luke Kennard. Like, they're definitely worse options, but like, there's other dudes out there that aren't Klay Thompson and haven't had such major knee injuries. And like someone like Klay Thompson, yeah, it's pissing off Warriors fans because he does take those off the dribble contested shots. And like, if you're Orlando, you don't want anyone. You've got a perfectly good offensive nucleus there. If you can bring in a shooter, why would you want someone who might see this new opportunity as, oh, they want me to do what I did for the last 2 years, which is off the dribble mid ranges?
Yeah. And to Max's point, if you can't tell, Max has like an NBA sports medicine kink. Huge Brian Sutter super fan here. But with Klay, it's the defense that went first. And, the Warriors play this beautiful passing game. Draymond and Steph, put it in the Louvre. But what really anchored the greatness, what allowed Steph to be such a maestro on the offensive end, was that they had Klay, who could guard anyone on the perimeter at his peak. Draymond, obviously one of the best defenders of all time. And then obviously when KD was there, KD went up a level on defense as well. Even in 2024, as Klay's numbers begin to dwindle, like his counting stats on offense aren't all that down. It's the side to side, it's the changing direction, just the burst that at their point of attack defense that where the difference is most felt, I'd say.
Yeah, it's disappointing because it's like it was such a perfect machine that everything just worked, and it was. If any team loses one of their best 3-and-D wings, and we've lost 2, if Andrew Wiggins can't get back to form, it's just not going to work. And like Kuminga, his shot's a little bit shaky, so you have to play Kuminga with 4 shooters. And Draymond's a shooter now, which is a nice, interesting little development. What is it, like near 40%, hitting mid-range, hitting half-court shots? It's just. Yeah. Which of these topics do you guys want to talk about first? We've got a couple of dot points here, but where do you want to start?
I would definitely love to talk about teams I can't stop watching, and also contenders I'd be down to talk about.
No, let's do that. What's the team that one of you guys can't stop watching?
I'll go first. Yeah, so we've talked about the Knicks already, who I can't stop watching because I'm a giant fan. But as far as like a random team I can't stop watching, it's New Orleans. One of the kind of first debates that Drew and I ever had as basketball fans and as friends was about Zion going into the draft. I just watched him in college, and I thought this is the most athletic basketball player I've ever seen. And he's able to dominate the way physically in a way that no one has since LeBron. And Drew, I won't speak for Drew, but basically thought, I've never seen anything like this before. There's no way that body will hold up with that amount of force being generated.
Pretty good take.
Pretty good take. It's aged pretty well by Drew. Hats off. To this point, yeah, that's definitely been borne out. But at the same time, a healthy and relatively in shape Zion, I think, is still one of the most intoxicating things to watch in the league. Just the way that he can even a guy like Rudy Gobert, Zion goes off every time he plays against Minnesota, and he went off when he played against Utah too. He just has a way of putting even the biggest guys in the NBA just like under the basket and being able to get to his left-handed layup whenever he wants. And beyond that, I'm just in love with the New Orleans supporting cast. Like, we're a huge Trey Murphy podcast. I've been very high on Jordan Hawkins since the draft. I think he has the prettiest jumper in the NBA. I just love watching him shoot. Herb Jones, we're big fans of. Dyson Daniels as well. Shout out Australia. And I'm just curious to see, because I think that their supporting cast 3 to 10 is championship level. Like, not to mention CJ, Jonas, all their role players. I think if you talk about any of the best duos in the league, whether it's even someone like LeBron and AD, or Murray and Jokic, any of the best duos, if you swapped them with Zion and Ingram, I think that supporting cast is championship ready. It's just a question of whether their top 2 guys can hit that like top level duo status in a playoff series. And we've never seen Zion in the playoffs. Ingram has played very well in the brief playoff experience he's gotten, but I'm very curious down the stretch of this season to see how they continue to work out the Zion Ingram like offensive balance in terms of who's dictating it most of the time. And then if it seems like they can really string together like 3 really good weeks of beating up on some of the highest competition, taking care of business against the bad teams, which has actually been a bit of an issue for them this year. But at the very least, Zion seems like he's getting into not quite peak Zion, Duke Zion shape, but at least very high level for him NBA shape. And that's, intoxicating on its own. And then seeing the rest of the team around him is also, why I can't stop watching.
Would you, I think we've got a big enough sample size. Do you reckon Zion and Ingram is do you reckon it's working? Because I also really love Trey Murphy, and I would love to see Ingram at the 4, Trey Murphy at the 3, and it sucks that he got injured at the start of this year, because it would have been nice to see full strength, and takes a while to get back in after such a major injury. How good would that lineup be? We've got Herb, Trey, Brandon Ingram, and then you don't have to worry about spacing, you don't have to worry about Zion. But then it's is the juice really worth the squeeze? Because it's isn't this the engine that runs everything? But what do you think about that? Maybe moving on from Zion.
Yeah, I definitely think that the whole is not the sum of the parts with Zion and Ingram. I don't love, honestly, Ingram's style of play. I'm someone who it might just be more of an aesthetic thing. I tend to like more like pace and ball movement and things like that. Ingram's more of a one-on-one sort of mid-range old school operator, which, has proven very effective in the playoffs. We haven't seen what Zion looks like in the playoffs, so I'll be very curious to see that, assuming they make it. But to this point, yeah, I'd say it hasn't exactly clicked. Zion is obviously the higher upside asset, because I still think he has the potential to be a top 10 player in the league if he can stay healthy. But at the same time, Ingram is the way surer bet to make, the most number of all-star teams between the two of them. So it seems like they're going to learn a lot from this playoffs and how Zion looks, if he can dominate physically in the same way, or if he can sort of get walled off, and his lack of a jumper and sort of ability to really score outside of the restricted area kind of comes up as a glaring hole in the playoffs. So yeah, I'd say the jury's still a little out, but overall, if you're trying to build a championship team, it doesn't seem like that particular duo is enough to get it done. So then they have to make a decision on which way they'd go. I'd probably lean towards Zion, just because I think he has that kind of transcendent upside, but Ingram is also a safer health bet. And, you don't have any questions about his approach, his mentality, all that stuff, which you might with Zion.
Drew, what do you think about the New Orleans situation, and then the team you can't stop watching?
I'll just leave it at this. I got a lot of shit from my Blazers friends for saying we should have traded the 3rd pick. Before I knew it was going to be Scoot. I didn't expect Scoot to fall to 3. I said we should trade the 3rd pick for Trey Murphy and just max that guy out. Just see how good Trey Murphy can be taking 12 threes a game.
I don't think that.
Yeah. But we need to stop talking about what could have been with Dame. A team that I've been loving watching, and I've actually made some cold hard cash off of, is this new look Indiana Pacers post the Siakam trade. I just love that they have such clearly defined roles on this team, and I think it's a particularly underratedly deep roster. Just like they have like 10 or 11 really competent rotational NBA players. And Halliburton, it all starts with Halliburton's creativity on offense. The hit-aheads, the lobs, the fact that he has one of the most awkward mechanical jumpers in the league, but it's just butter. And I don't really get how it works so well. And he also kind of shoots with his palm, like Dame, which makes it easier to shoot from way behind the three-point arc. Super interesting to watch him shoot with such efficiency. But like, I'm a big Aaron Nesmith fan. I think that there are not many better like mid-level 3-and-D guys than him who really embrace that role, take on the toughest matchups, etc. Siakam's a really good fit next to Miles Turner. I was impressed when I heard that Siakam really wanted to play with Miles Turner. Like he said, like that was his dream front court pairing, which was kind of a funny headline.
Like Turner or KD. It's like, holy crap!
Yeah, it was a funny headline, but it was also it tells you a lot about like his understanding of where he can thrive. And also maybe he's aware of his limitations, but knows how to max out everything he brings to the table. I'm also I love guys who do it a little differently. I love idiosyncratic players. So like Nembhard is weird. He's like 6'4", 6'5". He kind of gets into the lane at will. He doesn't really shoot threes. He doesn't really shoot free throws. Like not at all a Daryl Morey type of player. And yet he gets the job done. And he's been starting for them since they traded Buddy Hield, and he's been playing really well. I'm a big Nembhard guy. Underrated defender, I think, too. And then like McConnell is another guy. Doesn't shoot threes. He's small. And yet he's just ripping off Wayne Gretzky assists left and right. Guarding anyone that he can possibly guard at his size. And yeah, I just think that this Pacers team is going to continue to outperform kind of all the metric predictions towards the end of the regular season. As a playoff team, I don't know about the ceiling. Just because of the competition more than anything. It's just, it's a really loaded top of the East. The Cavs are coming on. Embiid might come back. So I'm not going to make any crazy statements about their playoff potential. But this is a really solid regular season team that can withstand a couple injuries and still, beat anyone 150 to 144, depending on the night.
Yeah. And the Nembhard, TJ McConnell stuff, I really like. I don't know why, but I just love having 48 minutes of really good point guard play. Like I feel like that's one of the easiest recipes to be a good team. Just make sure you don't have any holes at point guard. And it's like, cool, they've got TJ McConnell. They drafted Nembhard. I was really like high on Nembhard when he got drafted. And then Rick Carlisle just plays them all together. And I'm like, why are we doing this? Like these guys are reluctant shooters, but good at it.
Yeah.
You just want the ball in Tyrese' hands at all times. I get he can play off the ball, but maybe like with Siakam, not with the other point guard. But it just works. That is actually, I agree. I really like watching the Indiana Pacers, and they were one of my teams as well. But it's like I kind of don't like specifically when they're playing multiple point guards together. But it works. They win games. They score the ball. They pass the ball. So I can't really fault them for that.
For the ceiling, you're going to need to get the Benedict Mathurin that you thought you were drafting, and I haven't given up hope on him. He's been more Jalen Greeny than I'd like. I want more defense. He's bigger than Jalen Green. He's strong. I think Ben Mathurin should be a really good defender. Hasn't been so far. He's a bit of a ball stopper. But to your point about the 40 minutes of strong point guard play, they also have 40 minutes of stretch five next to Pascal Siakam, which is a really nice ingredient to get the best out of Pascal. When Miles Turner isn't on the floor, they have Obi, they have Jalen Smith. These are guys that are not elite rim protectors by any stretch, but are helping you with spacing on the other end. And Pascal Siakam, one of my favorite closeout attackers in the league, period.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, but I didn't really get the Buddy Hield trade as well. I'm interested to hear the thoughts from you guys, because Buddy Hield was one of the guys that helped them do what they do and helped them in transition, because while they have, before getting Siakam and now with Siakam, they have guys who can just run to the rim. Tyrese is happy throwing it or dribbling the ball up. But Buddy was always one of the guys who would just backpedal into the 3-point line, and he's just, he's a crazy shooter. I don't know if you guys listened to the end of last week's podcast, but if you can tell me where Buddy Hield is on all-time Indiana Pacers 3 points, it's surprisingly high. But they traded him for like second round pick and like a year's supply of high fives, which is like, can't you just, I know he requested a trade, but surely things have gone differently. Like, it's not like he really lost his spot to Benny Mather. What do you guys make of that whole situation?
Yeah, I mean, if it glass half full from Pacers fan perspective, is it's a vote of confidence in Mathurin that they think he can kind of step into that 2-guard role a long time. And I guess, I mean, is Buddy Hield's a free agent this summer, I think, right? So I guess they just wanted to get a little bit of value for him. And also just like for as dynamic as it is offensively, the Halliburton Buddy combo in the backcourt is just, come playoff time, teams are just going to pick on both of them relentlessly. I'm very curious to see what Halliburton looks like in the playoffs, just because he's such a unique style of player. We haven't really, I mean, he's kind of like an evolutionary Steve Nash in some ways, who's one of my favorite players of all time. But I'll be curious to see what that looks like. And I think, with the Siakam trade, they definitely saw they needed to upgrade their defense, because as good as their offense was, they weren't stopping anybody. And Obi Toppin at the 4 wasn't sort of the long-term front court defense solution next to Miles Turner. So it seems like, they're kind of trying to reorient around more two-way players between Siakam, and then hoping either Nembhard or Mathurin can kind of pop in that secondary role next to Halliburton. But I agree, offensively, it's definitely going to be a little step back this year without Buddy, because, he's not like a very glorified player, but he is one of the best shooters in the league behind sort of the big stars at the top of the league. Once you get past them, it's every year Buddy Hield up there in attempts, up there in both off the dribble and off the catch, and as well as in percentage. So yeah, I'm very curious to see Halliburton. And also, yeah, as Drew said, we were both very high on Mathurin. I thought he would be more 3-and-D, kind of like a smaller version of like the best Andrew Wiggins from 2022, or like Drew's going to like this one, like a prime Wes Matthews with a little more juice off the dribble, like Wes Matthews at his Portland days, who was really quite a weapon for those teams. But to this point, he's had much more of kind of an isolation scorer mentality. So I'm hoping he can sort of flush out more of that kind of well-rounded game that he had when he was in college. But yeah, all those guys, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how they look in the playoffs, and just if that's really high pace style, that frenetic style translates, because, with some teams it does, and with some teams historically it often doesn't.
Yeah, my team, the Phoenix Suns. I didn't think I would enjoy watching them this much, but it's just so interesting seeing a team play without a point guard. Crazy that I just said 10 minutes ago I love teams that can have a solid point guard for 48 minutes, and they don't at all. But just the drive and kick stuff. You see all these guys, just no one really dominates the ball. It's just drive and kick, drive and kick, drive and kick. If you do that for 20 seconds, you're probably going to get a wide open shot. Then you've got the whole stuff with Nurkic, who doesn't really like finishing, so the team's sort of playing around that, where they don't want to give it to him in too tricky of a spot. Then Devin Booker loves finishing, so he's more than happy just to be like, okay, well, we didn't get anywhere, let's just take a bad shot. And I loved watching that, and I still do. I kind of do wish they had traded for just a backup point guard, just so when you're in the playoffs and you're playing against a team that's got 3 excellent defenders for your 3 guys, just have someone like TJ McConnell, or just like a random backup point guard who can come in and just for a couple of possessions go, okay, this is the guy who's dribbling. The rest of you guys are just trying to get open, or just trying to get a really good post position if you KD. I hate that I like watching Phoenix, but I really do.
Yeah, they were a strong candidate to do like what Milwaukee did for Dame by bringing in Pat Beverly. Actually, they brought in Pat Bev and traded Campaign, which Campaign used to be a Phoenix Suns playoff problem. I'm all in on Devin Booker, the point guard. When people talk about Phoenix not having a point guard, I am always the asshole who's like, wait, like Devin Booker has now shown a massive willingness to pass, relocate, engineer open looks for other guys. That has been like the next evolution of his game. He started as like a Kobe protege, and he's evolved more into the guy who brings the ball up the court and moves around the defense, whether it's through creating his own shot or getting into the paint, kicking, and continuing to move. But yeah, I agree with you. Just for the sake of his durability and so that he doesn't have to, really beat himself up just to get you through a couple rounds, a strong veteran point guard presence behind him would have been certainly a help for them.
And it wouldn't be a playoff run if I don't get a Bleacher Report notification that says Devin Booker, something, hamstring, something. It's just, It's bound to happen now, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I mean, we haven't mentioned Bradley Beal yet either, who it seems like whenever they're kind of starting to find their groove, he has some sort of injury pop up. And then KD, who has been incredible this year, he's having one of the best 35-year-old seasons that we've seen, but also at the same time, 2 years ago in the Nets playoff series against Boston, he had a pretty forgettable series, was outplayed by Jason Tatum. Last year, he had a pretty good series against Denver, though not his most efficient, but like all around was a pretty good player. And it'll just be kind of curious to see what he looks like this year. I mean, Sean, do you think that Phoenix, like if they won the title, would you be absolutely shocked? Or do you think they kind of have that as a realistic outcome for them going into these playoffs?
I would be shocked. I think there's just so many more complete teams out there. Like Phoenix would have to beat maybe like, let's just say Denver and Boston. Like I don't see them beating them in a 7-game series, because at the end of the day, like 7 games is a lot of games. It's gonna come up who's the better team. And there's just too many holes, but it is fun to watch, but there's just too many holes in it. And we saw Denver, like I really liked in that Phoenix Denver series where it was like, oh, this is like super tight. Like who's going to win? And then Jamal Murray and Jokic just, obviously isolated on the weak side. And we're like, well, we're just going to do our thing over and over and over again, because you're going to have one bad defender out there at all times. Doesn't matter who it is. And then they added Bradley Beal, where it's like, is he a good defender? He might just be another target for that Jokic Murray pick and roll. I just unfortunately can't see them doing it, and I don't know how they fix it in the off season. And I'm very excited for the fall of the Phoenix Suns, which, a good friend of mine is a Phoenix fan, so I just love to see him sad.
Yeah, it's going to be hard defensively to survive playing Beal and Grayson Allen together. And Grayson Allen has been indispensable this year. He's having the year of his career, one of the best shooters on the planet. And still, like I mentioned earlier, Dame and CJ McCollum could not hang defensively with the best teams in the West at any point. Beal and Grayson, I'm actually a little bit lower on the Knicks this year because DiVincenzo is must play for them. And I think it's going to be hard switching on to some of these playoff offensive engines with Dante DiVincenzo and Jalen Brunson on the floor. So that's going to be an interesting thing to track with the Suns. As good as Grayson Allen has been, I still think he's less valuable in a playoff setting than like the Phoenix Jay Crowder, who didn't have nearly as much maybe off the dribble. He couldn't dribble like Grayson Allen. He couldn't take a possession at point guard here and there. And he didn't move off the ball with Grayson Allen's insane cardio. But he was more respected on the other end. And I'm just interested to see what the Suns look like, being a kind of defensively soft team that takes a lot of mid-range shots. Like those teams tend to lose the mathematical battle in the postseason.
Just before we wrap up, we will hit title favorites. So NBA resumes tomorrow, I believe. So plant your flags in. We'll start off with you, Max. Who is your title favorite as of today?
Yeah, I'm still going to say Denver. I think they just have an unstoppable half-court offense when they have their 5-man unit all together. And when it gets like to crunch time games, we saw it in their game against the Lakers. Not that there's some vaunted crunch time offense, but we saw it a couple weeks ago where when these games are close down the stretch, they're just going to get a great shot every time, even if it's like a Jokic elbow jumper, which he seems to make about 60% of the time. And they've proven they can get stops enough between KCP and Aaron Gordon and just sort of stringing together enough and putting so much pressure on you with their offense that you feel like you have to match them. We saw it against Phoenix last year where, Phoenix, they were looking really good with their jumpers going in the first few games of the series, and then those dried up and the Denver machine just kind of kept on going. So I don't see a team out there that can slow them down. I don't know if there really is a formula to do that. And then when we're talking about the other contenders, I don't trust Boston to be able to match them necessarily in crunch time execution if it gets down to that. And, the Clippers are probably there as well, but they've historically had a lot of trouble dealing with Jokic ever since the bubble. So I still think the Nuggets are the favorite. And I do think the champ is also going to come out of the West, since I think those teams are all really strong, and whoever comes out of it is going to be really battle tested.
Mm-hmm. True.
Yeah. I got no spice here. Everyone healthy. I'm sticking with the Nuggets because I picked them preseason over the Bucks. Milwaukee's looking a little scary right now, and not a good scary. But I'm sticking with the Nuggets because they have the best player in the world and what I think is still the most reliable playoff offense. And as we all know, playoff basketball is very different from regular season basketball. Just ask the Cavs and the Celtics. And as a Nuggets optimist, it can't be bad for motivation that they aren't even the betting favorite coming out of the All-Star break. They manhandled the Heat in the finals, who for most of the series kind of manhandled the Celtics. And yet the Celtics are the runaway favorites now on every betting site. It's interesting.
Yeah, look, this is going to be a little bit boring, but I also agree. My preseason prediction was the Bucks, because I'm just like, man, Dame with defenders behind him, that's incredible. Then when they fired Adrian Griffin, I was like, oh, okay, maybe I can go back to that take. Maybe it was just the coach. And they hired Doc Rivers. And it's like, well, no, Doc Rivers has proven to not be a great, not be a great playoff coach. And just someone who's like just killing it on longevity out of a 2008 playoff run. But yeah, I agree with the Denver Nuggets. Also, something that you might be familiar with, Drew, is just how you can just throw Aaron Gordon on everyone, where it's like, Aaron Gordon, we can't stop Dame. KCP is maybe just a little bit too not the right choice. Well, let's just throw Aaron Gordon on him. Like, Aaron Gordon is going to be defending the best player, and I trust him to do it. And maybe why they're not betting the betting favorites at the moment is because they've got a lot of Reggie Jackson minutes, and they've got a lot of DeAndre Jordan minutes, and that has been a problem for Michael/Mike Malone in the past. But last playoffs, he was like, okay, well, we're just not going to play any of our bench guys. We're going to go like maybe 7 deep, maybe 8 deep if it's a blowout. But even then, like, just to be sure, we're playing Aaron Gordon at the 5 as the backup for Jokic. Jokic is going to play 43 minutes, and it's so good. And it doesn't even look truly exhausting, because like it's not like 45 Jokic minutes are just a lot of push shots from the corner, from the elbow. We'll have to wait and see until they lose.
And Jokic, more than any of the superstars in the MVP conversation, gives his teammates a chance to find themselves offensively throughout the year. He's on the ball. He spends less time on ball than Paolo Banchero this year, and significantly less than Luka, Shea, and Giannis. That's, to me, the most amazing thing, that Jokic can be so selfless and still, according to the NBA's player impact estimate, which is like a composite of a bunch of different advanced stats, he's like the runaway MVP. So I just love the culture, the selfless culture that he facilitates in that offense.
It also must feel pretty good knowing that the Jokic stopper, DeAndre Ayton, won't be in the Western Conference playoffs this year as well. So, I mean, there's no one out there to stop him. Just before we wrap up, and I'll let you guys talk about like where our listeners can find your content. One question I like to ask every guest is, if you had to get one of those really nice jerseys, one of those like $500 jerseys for any player, current, past, future, I know you're a big draft guy, who is that player and why? And maybe even what kind of jersey is it?
Let's see. Do you have an answer off the top of the head, Drew?
Oh,
if not, I
can so
think
weird. I was a huge Leandro Barbosa guy back in the day. The Blur.
That's a great
And
one.
there was a year, this isn't even an NBA jersey, which might be cheating. There was a year that the Brazil national team had such beautiful, they looked like Sprite jerseys. They were just this crisp, like Oregon Ducks, green and yellow. And I've been trying to find that jersey on Alibaba for years. That would probably be $2, and I wouldn't want to know how it was made. Not, but the real ones should be $500. That's how beautiful these Brazilian jerseys were, like 10 years ago.
I've just Googled it. There's a few good Brazil jersey options here. That's a great chance. You can definitely pick a non-NBA jersey. That is a great answer.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I mean, Jalen Brunson's the obvious answer right now, but I might end up getting one of those anyways. Although my brother and I stopped getting each other jerseys because every jersey we got ended up getting traded. The last one being Porzingis. But yeah, I'm going back and forth between a Steve Nash Santa Clara jersey from college, or Drew inspired me a bit with his international one because we do love Boris Diaw, as the name of our podcast suggests, and it's like a running joke that every draft cycle, all my favorite prospects I compare to Boris Diaw. So maybe a France Boris Diaw jersey I'd go with.
I feel like you have to hang in the back of your podcast as well. Like, just get a couple of different Boris Diaw jerseys. And what's he doing nowadays? Is he a coach somewhere?
I don't know. I saw an interview pop up from him where he said he never made a shot with his left hand in his entire NBA career. That's the only thing I've heard from him recently.
So he's just talking. He's just still drinking espresso and just talking.
Yeah. I don't even want to know what he's up to now. In my mind, he's just like a master sommelier somewhere, probably in Australia.
Yeah. Well, love to catch up with him. My answer always swings between like a pre-Nike Mo Spates jersey and then like a late Sean Livingston. Just some of the best role players you can ever have. But yeah, that's I'm sure listeners have already heard my answer to that question. But yeah, guys, thanks for coming on the podcast. Just before we wrap up, where can our listeners get involved and find your content, socials, podcast, everything?
Yeah, and thanks so much for having us on. This was a ton of fun for us. You can listen to us anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, the Boris Dirk Podcast. And on Twitter, we are at Boris Dirk Pod. We made that over the summer and have been posting a lot on there, trying to gain the following there as well. So yeah, would love for everyone to tap in, listen in. Last week, we recorded a little all-star reaction and then sort of our most burning questions for the rest of this season. So yeah, looking forward to the stretch run and definitely going to be putting out a lot more content.
Yeah, beautiful. And I'd definitely give you guys a follow. I started following you guys a couple of weeks ago. And you post some really interesting stats. Like, it's like, I would say it's Kirk Goldsberry-esque, but more nerdy and front officey, and it's nice. I like it.
Yeah, I'm doing deep dives every day on the NBA advanced little panel dashboard thing they have there.
So good. Good.
Sell me all your Scoot Henderson stock, all right? He's going to be fine. He's going to be fine. He's getting to his spots. Don't worry.
His spots might be the wrong ones, but that's all right. But yeah, thanks for coming on, guys.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
The NBA moves so quickly these days, it's hard to keep up. Shams and Woj are breaking stories left and right, but the Quick Time Out is right there with them to keep you informed on the latest NBA news. Stop in and let us break it down as it happens. Find the Quick Time Out on the Deep 2 Podcast Network.